goodness.
You know what nuns do when they're...
You should be prostituted.
Merry Christmas.
Breaking the rules, holding on to faith. That's the first contradiction that defines Holy Days, and the moment I watched the new US trailer, it became clear this film knows exactly what kind of story it wants to tell. Not a loud comedy, not a shallow road trip, something warmer, stranger, and quietly emotional. Before we begin, would you please support me? Subscribing is free and very important to me. Please subscribe for better analysis and more videos. Blue Fox Entertainment has released the official US trailer for Holy Days, a New Zealand-produced comedy that looks deceptively simple on the surface. 3 elderly nuns, a grieving child, a road trip across New Zealand, and yet the further the trailer goes, the more obvious it becomes that this is a film built on loss, belief, and the messy ways people try to heal. Holy Days first premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival in 2025, and after building strong word of mouth, it's now preparing for a wider theatrical rollout in the US beginning in March. From the very first frame, the movie leans into a kind of old-fashioned charm, the kind that feels almost forgotten in modern studio comedies. At the center of the story is Brian, a young boy played by Elijah Tamati. Brian isn't chasing adventure for fun. He's chasing heaven. After losing his mother, he becomes convinced that she can be brought back if only he can reach the place where she now exists. With nothing but a vague clue pointing to a snowy mountain, Brian sets out on a journey that is equal parts absurd and heartbreaking. And he doesn't go alone. Along the way, Brian crosses paths with 3 aging nuns living in a convent on the brink of closure. Agnes, Mary Claire, and Luke are played by Judy Davis, Jacki Weaver, and Miriam Margolyes, and they are anything but traditional religious figures. These women are stubborn, eccentric, tired of being ignored, and deeply human. At first, their partnership with Brian is reluctant. They don't see themselves as heroes. They don't see themselves as saviors. But as the journey unfolds, that uneasy alliance slowly transforms into something far more meaningful. What starts as convenience becomes connection. What begins as chaos turns into belief. The trailer frames the journey as a comedy that keeps getting worse in the best possible way. Stolen money, a car that feels almost divinely empowered, decisions that spiral out of control. Every step forward seems to invite another problem. And yet, the humor never feels cruel. It feels lived in, earned. What stands out immediately is the tone. Holy Days doesn't rush to punchlines. It allows silence. It allows discomfort. It lets the characters exist long enough for their oddities to feel natural rather than forced. That's where the film's emotional weight starts to settle in. Visually, the movie leans heavily on New Zealand's landscapes. Open roads, rural towns, and wide skies give the journey a sense of scale, while the characters themselves remain small and fragile within it. The contrast works beautifully. It reinforces the idea that belief, no matter how strong, is always tested by the vastness of the world around it. The film comes from the producing team behind the acclaimed New Zealand drama Uproar, and that pedigree shows. There's a confidence here in letting characters drive the story rather than plot mechanics. Holy Days feels like a 1,970 seconds road movie filtered through modern sensibilities, balancing humor with melancholy in equal measure. Nat Bolt, who writes and directs the film, is making her feature-length directorial debut here. You might recognize her from her work as an actor or from directing episodes of Riverdale, but Holy Days marks a clear shift in tone and ambition. This is a deeply personal project, and it shows in how carefully the film treats its themes. The story is adapted from a novel by Joy Cowley, and that literary foundation gives the film a softness that feels intentional. This isn't a story about mocking faith. It's about questioning it, stretching it, and sometimes breaking it in order to understand what it really means. There's also a strong undercurrent about aging and relevance. The nuns are facing the closure of their convent, a symbolic end to a life they've known for decades. They are being phased out, quietly and without ceremony. Brian's presence forces them to re-engage with the world, to matter again, not as relics, but as people capable of change. If you find yourself smiling during the trailer and then suddenly feeling a lump in your throat, that's not accidental. The supporting cast adds even more texture. Bolt herself appears as Liz, Brian's father's new girlfriend, a character who represents the future Brian is trying desperately to avoid. Before Liz can fully replace his mother, Brian believes he has one chance to fix everything. That urgency fuels the entire film. Holy Days has already been selected for screenings at major festivals, including Sundance Film Festival and the Santa Barbara International Film Festival, where it will make its world premiere on February 5th. Those selections suggest confidence not just in the comedy, but in the film's emotional resonance. From a release standpoint, the rollout is ambitious. The film opens in New Zealand on February 26, arrives in Canada shortly after, and will hit US theaters on March 27th through Blue Fox Entertainment. It's also being actively marketed to international buyers at major European film markets, signaling strong belief in its global appeal. What makes Holy Days especially interesting is how accessible it feels without being shallow. It's clearly aimed at a young-at-heart audience, but it doesn't underestimate its viewers. It allows grief to coexist with humor. It lets faith be messy, and it treats friendship not as a punchline, but as something that grows through shared struggle. This is not a movie about finding heaven in a literal sense. It's about finding peace in motion, about learning that belief doesn't always come from answers, but from connection. And that's why Holy Days stands out. In a landscape full of loud comedies and cynical road movies, this one feels sincere. It feels kind, and sometimes that's exactly what sticks with you the longest. If you're still here with me, you can probably feel it too. That sense that this film isn't trying to impress you. It's trying to reach you. Until next time, keep an eye out for the quiet movies that sneak up on you, and I'll see you in the next breakdown.